Welcome to the Purpose Cycle podcast, the podcast that brings listeners impactful practices that build towards fruition and fulfillment. Thanks for joining me for my Season 1 recap. Before we get started, I just want to say a big shout out to Suit Up Apparel. Suit Up Apparel are a new menswear company who provide fantastic attire for the working world and for casual wear too. Now, don't worry, even though the welcome sale is now over at Suit Up Apparel, Purpose Cycle listeners can still get 10% off with the code PURPOSE at checkout. There is also a special Purpose collection on there, designed by myself, to make sure that you look great, feel great, and achieve your goals. Be sure to check them out at suitupapparel.co.uk. Hello everybody, and welcome to the season recap of the Purpose Cycle podcast. My name is Jonathan Tucker, and I've been your host throughout the whole of season 1. And I've been joined by some fantastic guests along the way this season. And what we're going to do today is basically break those down and talk a little bit more about basically their impact and how they've affected myself, but also take some questions from you listeners too. And before we start, I just want to say a big thank you to everybody who has been a part of either listening or as a guest on season 1, because it is something that started for me in, I'd say maybe October or November of 2020, after what was such a crazy year for everybody, and to have the sort of vision really to bring impact to people by interviewing a lot of people who had already been through some of the things that we had in various areas of life. So not just, people who I knew, but also pick apart the brains from people who have been successful in other walks of life that I've not really experienced. And I really feel that we managed to do that by finding out their story. And I believe that everybody's got a story to tell and to share. And it was great really for these people who were my guests to open up and really talk about how their experiences shaped them for the future and for the better as well. And even those experiences that weren't necessarily a building experience, they made it into those building experiences. So even a negative experience was turned into a positive for a lot of these people. I'm thinking along the lines of Marcus Ogden in particular, who had a really tough time in terms of rebuilding his whole business again. And thinking back to Sean Doherty in his Life After War podcast, of really reevaluating his life and where he wanted to go and taking those risks to go travelling and moving to a completely different part of the country after experiencing some pretty, say traumatic or pretty, horrifying events for a 21-year-old soldier over in Afghanistan. So what I'm going to do is just talk through some of the questions that you guys have sent me first of all, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about how season 1 helped me, and maybe I'll answer that in some of these questions too, but then also look forward to season 2, which I can promise you all is absolutely fantastic as well. So my first question from Instagram is, which podcast did you personally take the most from? And that is a really good question, because I managed to have some fantastic guests on, and I managed to take a little bit from everybody, and I really feel like that was the real point of this podcast. I mean, for me, in a selfish way, it helped me grow quite a lot, because I spoke to people and picked the brains of people who had already been through things that I was looking to go through myself, or even experienced different things to what I'll never really experience. And I managed to take a lot of inspiration from all of my guests. In terms of what did I take the most from, I'd probably say our second to last episode of the season from Ali Ether, because I was somebody who really found sleep difficult. I couldn't really get high quality sleep, and I also didn't really have a set sleep regime. So I became quite unproductive, and my sleep pattern was quite sporadic, and I really found that episode really useful, because it's something that I knew nothing about, and I've managed to take quite a lot of the tips that Ali has offered in her episode, and it's really helped me implement that into my life and become more productive as a person. It's really helped in the growth and the development of this podcast and my writing as well, and just in my day-to-day job. So I would probably say the podcast I took the most from was Ali Ether's episode, and specifically part 2, when she really delves into the sleep tips. But there's quite a lot on there when she talks about, having that brain fog from low sleep is equivalent to at least a 0.5 blood alcohol level. And that really strikes a chord, because you feel about how you're not at your best or at your optimum, are you, if you're slightly intoxicated with alcohol. So it's the same when you haven't slept correctly as well. Next question: which episode surprised you the most? Again, really tough question. I think I'm going to go for Sean Doherty's episode, Life After War, because I knew that Sean, being a close personal friend of mine, had been through quite a lot anyway. But it was quite surprising to hear the full sort of stories, really, of what he went through. And a really interesting fact for the listeners, and I really hope Sean doesn't mind me saying this, but in the first part of the interview, Sean didn't have his camera on when we were talking. I felt like that was because he really found it maybe a difficult thing to open up and talk about at first. And as the interview progressed, in the second part, he actually had his camera on. And it was great to see that sort of face-to-face, almost virtually anyway, eye contact, because it felt like he was opening up more. And he really did feel great after talking about some of these experiences. And I feel like that podcast surprised me the most, because I knew he had a fantastic story, but, the impact of the episode, really. And I feel like that episode should be played to a lot of people who might be going through any sort of PTSD from war or anything like that, really. I think it'd be really useful. So I would say Sean Doherty's episode, Life After War, both part 1 and 2, surprised me the most. Right, next question. So another Instagram one, and it's what's next for the podcast? Really like this question. So obviously season 2's next. What I'm hoping to do is I'm looking for a venue. I've sent a few inquiries out. I'm trying to find myself a venue in which I'll be able to bring guests in to be able to talk to them as well, which I'm really looking forward to doing. But I've interviewed most of season 2. It's pretty much done, and I'm just waiting for that time. I feel like it's really important to have a break. So at the moment, my immediate future of season 1 of the podcast is that season 1's out there, and that I'd like people to really go back and listen and digest the messages that my guests have, because I think it's quite easy with podcasts to take the episode and go week after week and sort of rally through them without actually taking in what's been said, and it's quite easy to binge podcasts like it is Netflix series. But are you truly digesting the information from the guests? And I feel like that needs to be done. I'm going to go back and personally listen through them all as well, again, to make sure that I take all of the messages, and there'll be things that when I've listened through once the podcast has been released that I didn't really pick up on at the time of the interview or editing. So I've listened to these podcasts 3 or 4 times already, each episode, and I'm finding new things all of the time, and that's going to be the same thing for you guys. I'm not saying listen through 4 or 5 times, of course, but when you've got a bit of time, go back, listen through them again, and I can assure you'll pick up a lot more information than you did before. And in terms of what's next for the podcast, like I said, season 2 will be coming out around May time, so we're going to have a little bit of a month's break. I'm going to open up the episode of season 2 with 30 things at 30, because it'll be my 30th birthday in May. Really looking forward to sharing that one with you. And then I've got some fantastic guests which I interviewed. Following on from that, obviously I'll be looking to do season 3 to finish before the end of the year, and 3 seasons a year is something that I'm looking to do. Obviously looking to manage the time quite well with my own personal time as well. And of course, what we're looking to do is build an audience and build a community, which I feel sort of be like-minded and really appreciating people's growth and stories that they want to share as well. And that's something that I'm looking forward to doing. In terms of the Purpose Cycle as a concept, what's next for that? Of course, the book's still in the works, and also I've got my first coaching client, which I've really enjoyed working with. A couple of sessions so far with him, and more of that, really helping people, doing a little bit of speaking. And okay, next question then. Who did you relate to the most? That is a really crazy question, because when you're going through the episodes, you've got Tom Nicholson as the first guest, which I really enjoyed because he really talked about the dreams and visualizations and how he repeated that and saw it very clearly play out in his head before he achieved his goals ultimately. And that's something that I like to do as well. So I found that really, really useful. I felt like I related quite a lot to Tom and his story, even though I had a very different story and a very different journey. All the different stages of my career that I've had so far and my life, I have visualised and planned out before it's even happened. So I would say I relate quite a lot to Tom. But even then, going through to the growth side of things, Peter Komalafe, as my next guest in episode 3, talked about asking yourself a question of what is it that you want in life and really building towards that as well. And I really enjoyed looking at that side of things as well and seeing money as a tool to get you to where you want to be, not the be all and end all in life. It's merely a tool to help you achieve what you want to achieve, essentially. And Josh Beat, I related quite a lot to him in his 2-part episode. He talked about accountability and building habits. Now, he's somebody who's done it over 10 years quite consistently, and he's definitely somebody who I'm looking to as more as an inspiration, really, because he's been there and done that and built his success over 10 years. So that is certainly something that, hopefully in 10 years I can emulate a similar following or success to what Josh has got. Now, Sean Doherty in his episode was quite relatable as well, because he talked about designing the life that he wanted, and he really reevaluated everything, and he had that drive in order to achieve what he wanted. So he decided, look, the time is right for me. I want to make sure that I be the parent that I wanted as a child, and really designed that life that he's built for himself now, and that he's managed to be a fantastic parent to his 2 boys. Looking to Ben Rainey as well, he talked about being authentic and staying true to yourself and your identity, and that's something that I'm making sure that I try to do in this journey, because it's quite easy on like a positivity sort of motivational type page that I'm running on Instagram to always be that person who's upbeat and always raring to go, when life isn't quite like that. And I've been quiet here and there on social media when I've got quite a lot of things going on, and people may have noticed that, but I'm not going to go out there and post like and I'm feeling fantastic, I'm always on the ball, because that's just not being human, is it? So that really resonated with me, and that's something that I wanted to try and emulate as well. And yeah, I've sort of answered that question in quite a long way, really, but if I had to relate to one person probably the most, it would probably be my first guest, Tom Nicholson. Okay, so in terms of the lessons that I learned from the first season, I would say that looking towards pretty much the last 2 episodes, the third to last and second to last episode, from Marcus Ogden and Ali Ifa respectively. Now, Marcus talks about the inside to outside theory, and that's thinking about what you can do and what you can change and affect before looking externally. So rather than blaming other people, looking at yourself and thinking, right, how can I react to that situation differently? And that is something that I've tried to really pick up on since the episode, and I've really enjoyed Marcus's insight to that one. One of my favourite episodes, really good interview there with Marcus, and yeah, he also talked about pivot, and with that, he said a quote that I really liked. He said, strategy without execution is useless. So obviously thinking about what you want to do and planning it out in your head is great, but actually acting on that is another thing, which is really, really useful as well. And pivot, he wrote as an acronym for poise, inspire, victory mindset, observe, and tactician. So when I'm going through different sort of stages now in what I'm trying to build, I'm trying to think about pivot and how I can pivot in order to achieve my dream life as well. In terms of other messages, it was the Ali Ifa one with the sleep was really useful for me, because she had a lot of data that backed up her research and her implementations of the plans. So a lot of it can be based upon experience from a lot of these people, what they're sharing. But Ali has also gone away and done the work and the research to find out how to build her program as well, and I found that really, really useful. So, next question, and it says, how have you grown as a podcaster since the first episode? Now, probably not a lot given by my answer. It probably sounds like it's a really tough question, and obviously doing these types of questions on the spot, I haven't really had a look at them beforehand, does make you think. And I feel like maybe I've got better at questioning and digging deeper towards the points. My first episode I ever recorded was actually the third one with Peter Komalafe, and I felt like I left a lot out there. Peter was fantastic with me. He really did guide me on that episode, and I felt like following on from that, I made a conscious point to really reflect and evaluate and think about, right, how can I ask better questions? How can I ask more valuable questions? And how can I then delve into the answers by really actively engaging in what they're saying? Of course, I was listening before and I was making notes, but to really take it in and delve deeper into those questions. And I feel like that's how I've grown as a podcaster throughout. I've always enjoyed doing this sort of thing, whether it's doing a YouTube video, school radio stations or podcasts, university radio, and this podcast. It's all built up towards this, to try and hone in on my skill sets. And hopefully in season 2, you will see quite a lot of growth from myself as a host from season 1 going into season 2. Now, I'm going to quickly talk about season 2 before we leave for today's episode. And I've got to say, I've delved deeper into the various minds of different people once again, and I've managed to get myself some personal trainers, authors, business coaches, the lot. And I'm really excited to share with you some of the experiences that they have to share. Now, before we even look at season 2 properly and we go into the previews and everything else, I encourage all of you to go back, listen through season 1, pick out your favourite guest, and make sure you drop me a message on Instagram to tell me which guest of yours was the favourite, which one brought you the most impact and why. And we're also going to be bringing out short and sweet bonus episodes with some certain tips going into our season 2. So there will be little fillers between now and season 2 proper, so be sure to make sure you subscribe so you do not miss out on those. Thank you very much, everybody, again for a fantastic season 1, and I'm looking forward to seeing you all in season 2.
Watch me not stop though.